Hey guys, welcome back to the 10th and final episode of building Ember CRM. And in this video, we're going to cover displaying and creating and editing tasks in a Twitter Bootstrap modal. And we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab the modal template code or markup. And I'm going to name it task modal, and then you'll see a lot of just I copy pasted the modal example on the docs, and then so this template assumes that the model backing it is a task model. So with that being said, hopefully going through this will make a little more sense. So this will refer to the model, and so I'm checking if it is new, and if it is new, I'm going to display a new task header. Else I'm editing a task, so I'm going to display the edit task. And then the tasks are real simple, and they only have one editable field, and that is the subject. And I'm using an input helper, and I'm binding the subject of the task to the value. And you'll notice I use this dot is new to refer to the is new flag on the model, and then on here I'm dropping this, so you can just not use this, so hopefully that'll clear some questions up. Alright, and then after that I'm going to have three buttons: a save button, a delete button, and a cancel button. The save button is going to send the save action, the delete button is going to send the delete action, and then the cancel is going to send the cancel action. Okay, so let's go back and modify some existing templates and create some buttons so that we can add tasks to our company and people models. So if I go up here and I copy this guy and I go find my person edit, I'm going to stick this in here. So this is going to live right alongside the cancel button, and I'm just going to display add task, and I'm going to send the new task action, which we'll implement in a bit. So I'm going to copy this and put that on the company. You know what? I don't want to put that on the edit template. I want to put that on the show template. So I'm going to do that right here. Okay, yeah, that's what I meant to do. So that's going to be displayed on the show template. And then I also want to put that on the company show template, which is here. Okay. So that looks good. And then now these tasks it's just plain text as a list item, and I want to create a link out of those. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab this, and then in the show templates, I'm going to replace just the task.subject with this new template code. And what this is, it's a anchor tag, and I am sending the edit task action with the current task in the iteration as an argument to the edit task action. And then in here on the anchor tag, I'm binding a class, a CSS class. So the way that works is there are several different ways, but if it's a Boolean, this is how you do a Boolean true or false properties. So the first thing you want to have is the Boolean attribute. So I want to check if the task is dirty. And if it's dirty, I want the class, the CSS class, to be dirty. And in here, you'll see in my style.css that I have an actual dirty CSS class, and I'm just styling it color red. And then if the task is not dirty, I want the not dirty CSS class, and I'm styling the not dirty to be green. So that's pretty simple. And I want the same markup for the person show. There we go. Now again, none of these actions are hooked up yet, so we've yet to do that. Okay, so let's make sure that's displaying correctly. Alright, we got our add task button, and right now it doesn't do anything because we haven't implemented a new task action. And then we can click on this and we get the edit task action, and it should be same for the companies. So that's looking good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create the controller, because currently we're on the person controller because we're viewing a single person. But within this route, we want to use another controller. We want to use the task modal controller. And so I'm going to create that now. So go to controller.js, and I want to name it app task modal controller. And remember, because of the Ember's naming conventions, this needs to be the name of your template. So task modal. So I'm naming it task modal and then appending the word controller. And then I want to extend Ember object controller because we're dealing with a single task. And then I want to use one of Ember's mix-ins, and I want to use Ember evented, and I'll go over why in a second. Okay, so in here, all we're going to do is implement some actions. And the first action we want to do is the save action. Okay, and if you'll remember that the routers, or the routes, are responsible for sending the model to the controllers. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that this controller already has its model, and we'll get to setting the model later. Okay, so we want to get a handle on the task by doing this.get model, and then we want to assign self to this, and then we just want to call save. And because it returns a promise, we want to do something after that. And for now, we'll do console log saved task. And then we want a delete action. And then we're going to do the same thing right here. Paste this in. And then this is a little different because it's polymorphic. First, we want to get a handle on its taskable model, which is either the company or person, and we can do that by doing this task get taskable. And then now that we have that company or person, we can say task.destroy record. Then we're just going to assume that it's not going to have a failure, because I've already showed you how to deal with failures. So if you want to display errors, you can you'll know how to do that. But I'm not going to do that for this video. So we're going to call task.destroyRecord, and that's going to issue a delete request for this specific task. And then in this success callback, I want to, you know what, I want to move this in here because we don't need it outside of, we only need it if it's successful. So in the success callback, I'm going to get a handle on the company or person, and then I'm going to do taskable get task, and that's going to return to me that company or person's array of tasks. And then I want to remove object task. And if you don't do this, your template won't be updated. So you need to do this to keep your UI in sync with what's actually happened. And then we'll console log deleted task. Alright, and then now we want a cancel. And we want to get a handle on the task. And then we want to roll back any changes that we've made. And then if task get is new, we want to do this same thing to keep our UI in sync. Remove that from the person or company. And then we'll console log canceled task. Okay, so that looks good. You know what? I'm just gonna. So I was keeping these console log placeholders because I was gonna explain something later, but I think I'm gonna attempt to explain it now. And the reason I did this is in Ember, typically the flow goes from the view. So if you're sending actions, the actions go from the view. If they come from the view, they go to the controller. If they're not handled on the controller, they get handled on the route. And if they're not handled on the route, then Ember will tell you in the console that no, the action was unhandled. So because of that flow upwards, and we're dealing with a Bootstrap modal, we need a way to send the view actions. And there's not really a good way to do that because of the way the action flow works. But I figured out, and I don't know if this is an anti-pattern or not, but I figured out a way to send actions to our view. And so we can do that by using the Ember evented mixin. And what we can do with this is we can trigger events. And because we're dealing with modals, a modal, I want to trigger the hide modal event because we've saved the task successfully, and we want to dismiss the modal. So this doesn't actually do anything yet. And we'll latch on to this event in a little bit. Alright, so I'm just going to replace all of these console logs with this. So if we delete it and it's successful, I just want to trigger this event, and then if we cancel, I also want to trigger that event. Okay, so with that in mind, and with this event being triggered not doing anything, let's make it do something. Alright, so we've got our controller set up, And now we want to, because we're using the Bootstrap modal and we've got some kind of advanced UI functionality going on, we're going to use an Ember view. And again, because we're using that task modal name, we want to use the task modal view name for our view. And we're going to extend Ember view. And then in here we can specify what template we want to use. And we want to use the task modal template. And then we're going to set the model to null by default. And then we're going to add some classes to the div that kind of wraps up our template code. And we're going to assign the CSS classes of modal and fade to that wrapper div, because we want to fade in the modal. And then we want to implement the didInsertElement method and the willDestroyElement method. And this might get kind of confusing, so bear with me. Okay. So whenever we say we want to render the task modal, Ember is going to look for this task modal view object, okay? And then it's going to use this object to actually construct the view that gets displayed in the UI. So, and because we're using a modal, we want to do some setup for our for Bootstrap and clean up, because we're going to destroy the modal. So after we insert the task modal template into the markup, we want to do a few things to set up that markup. First thing we want to do is get the controller. And this will be that task modal controller that we just created. And then as soon as we insert the markup into the UI, we want to call modal show, and this is Bootstrap specific. We want to fade that modal in, and then we want to assign self to this, and then we're going to subscribe to that event that we're triggering in our controller. So we're going to subscribe to the on hide modal event. And in here we're going to do some stuff. And in here we're going to say self, get a handle on that wrapper div that's Bootstrap modalified, and then we're going to call modal hide, and that's going to fade the modal out, but the markup's still going to be there. And then after we do that, we want to unbind that event from the controller. And we do that because the next time that if we didn't have this, the next time this view was used, that controller would still hold a reference to this specific callback function for the next modal that we display. And so we need to get rid of this specific callback, and we do that by unbinding the hide modal event. And that's probably pretty confusing, and it may take a little bit to sink in, and I encourage you to go kind of comment out some stuff and run it and see what happens, because that's exactly what I had to do. But I'll comment this stuff with comment this code with some of what's going on. So we're going to show the modal, and then when the controller triggers hide modal, we want to actually hide the modal. And then we actually hide the modal by calling the Twitter bootstrap modal and then sending in the hide string. And then we were going to unbind the controller from this specific callback. Okay, so that's what we want to do when we get a hide modal on the controller, and that's how we communicate from the controller to the view. Now that's the way I came up with. And again, I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but that's how I'm doing it. And then after that, we want to also subscribe to an event bootstrap throws. So, and this is for Bootstrap 3, and it'll trigger this event whenever the modal is fully hidden. And in here, we want to send an action to the route. And to do that, we can get a handle on the controller, and then we do it. We've done this before, so we just send up an event, and we'll send up a remove modal event, or action, I should say. So we're going to send up the remove modal action to the current router, and we'll implement that in a minute. And then finally, for the will destroy element, I looked this up just earlier today, and I think this is the preferred method of destroying modals and cleaning up after yourself. But I'm not 100% sure. I haven't dug into the Bootstrap modal JavaScript code. But so we'll save that, and that's what our view code will look like. Okay, so still currently nothing is hooked up, and to hook it all up, we need to visit the router. And then because we're on the person route right now, we want to add some actions to the person route. So we'll add actions, create a hash, and then here, because we have this add task action, and we're sending, or we have this add task button that's sending a new task action. If we don't catch that in the controller, which we're not, we don't have a new task action, that'll bubble up to this route. So in here we can say new task, we can catch that action here, and then in here we want to create a new task by using the store, calling its create record method and passing it what we want to create. And then just below this, we want to get a handle on the current person. So we'll get controller, because the model is set on the controller. So we want to get the model from the current controller, which will be the person, because we're in the person route. And then we want to say get the task for that person, and then push an object, push the task into that array. And that will make it be reflected in the UI. And then below here, we want to get the controller instance that Ember is going to use for our task modal. So to do that, we can use the controller for method and pass it the task modal name. And this matches the template, and then Ember will append a task. It'll format it in the way, in the naming conventions that it's made up for itself. So this is how you get the controller that we've just created, task modal controller. So we want to get that controller, and then we're going to set the model ourselves because we're in the route, and that's the route's responsibility. And we're going to set it to the task, the new task model. And then finally, we want to render task modal, the name of our template, and we're going to pass it some options. And we want to render this into the person template, into the task modal outlet. And we don't have that yet, so let's go add that. So if we go back to our templates and we go to our person template, we can create a named outlet, and we can programmatically render markup into this outlet. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to render the task modal markup into this outlet, which is going to use our new controller. Okay, so that should be all that we need to do there. And we'll go over this again because I think it confused me at first. So the first thing we're going to do is create a task. We're going to get the person for the current route, because we're in the person route. We're going to push the new task instance in their task array, and then we're going to grab the controller for the template, for the task modal template, and then we're going to set the model on that controller. And then finally, we're going to render the task modal template into the person template into the task modal outlet that we've just created. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and again, it's probably going to take some experimenting to get that really nailed down in your head. So, okay, so the next task or action we want to implement is the edit task action. And then if you'll remember in our template, this action is being sent from this link. We're saying we want the edit task action to be sent with the task model. So in our router, in our edit task action, we need to catch that task model in here. And we want to do the same thing. Get the controller for task model, and then set the task, and then we're going to call render task modal. Do the same thing. Do that same thing, and then finally we want to remove the modal. And in here we can disconnect an outlet. And we want to disconnect the task modal outlet in the person template, the person parent view. So if we save that, that should all be hooked up, and we need to copy this for the company route because we want we want to have this same functionality for our companies. Change this up so it makes a little more sense. Save that. And then we'll go see if it works. Refresh. Getting some errors. Did not match any routes in your application. I think I have a typo. Get. There we go. Save that and try it again. Alright. So first, let's try to add a task. So if I add a task, our modal pops up. Perfect. And if we start typing, hello world, we can see it in the background as red because we're binding that class to the isDirty CSS class. And then we can save it. And that came back. We issued a post request, got created, that came back, and it sent save. It triggered that hide modal event, and in that hide modal event, in our view, we're latching onto that, and we're saying whenever we get that hide modal event, we want to actually hide the modal, calling Bootstrap's hide method, and we want to disconnect from that. And then because this triggers the hide animation, once the animation is done, we're sending the remove modal action. That remove modal action bubbles up to the route on the, what are we on? We're on a person. So it bubbles up to the remove modal action on the route. And then we're disconnecting that task modal outlet right here from the person template. And then I remember I need to add this outlet to the company template as well. Okay. So now let's click on an existing one. And you'll notice it changed back to green because, again, because we've bound to that isDirty flag, and because it came back and got saved and it's not dirty anymore, it's swapped over to the new CSS class. So you notice it's green in the background. Start typing. It goes to red. I'll save it. Issues a put request. Comes back okay. And it's green. And then let's try the cancel. Blah, blah, blah. And we'll cancel it. Gotta fix that. The cancel action isn't working correctly. I did not declare self. So I need to do that. So in the controller, I need to declare, or I don't need self actually, I just need this. So let's try that again. Start typing, cancel, there we go. Modal gets hidden, our changes get rolled back. Alright, let's check out the companies and make sure everything works on the companies. Let's add a task. Whoop. I'm trying to render into the wrong template. So in our company actions, we're not using the person template, we're using the company template. Let's save that, and that should work. Alright, there we go. Hello again. Let's call save. Get saved. And then let's try the delete. So we'll go to the network tab and see it in action. Delete. Doing something wrong again. Okay, I think I figured it out, and I have no idea why it broke. But if I move this out of the callback, then it appears to work. So if I save that, refresh it, okay, so there's our task that we just created. And then we'll watch the network, click delete, and there we go. Delete was okay, and it removed it from the company's task or array of tasks. There we go. Okay, so that wraps up Ember CRM. Again, there's a lot more we could do, but I think that covered a lot of the things. It covered a lot of aspects I was concerned about whenever I was getting started with Ember CRM. So I hope it helped you, and if you like it, I'd appreciate it if you shared the series or subscribed to my YouTube. Anyways, had fun, and I'll see you around.